And today I want to do a small presentation on the Portuguese and the transatlantic slave trade. You know, one of the things that we also have an issue with is history and who are the people who were involved in our enslavement and our downfall. And one of the people that often gets overlooked in the Caribbean are the Portuguese. Today I hope to do a small, just a very short presentation on the Portuguese and how they started the Caribbean slave trade and how they profited even though they did not have colonies in the Caribbean. So without further ado, I go right ahead. So again, this is how the Portuguese started the Atlantic slave trade. And we start with a brief background. The Portuguese now have driven out the Moors. The Moors were an Arab and African group of Muslims that came over to Europe in the 7th century. And they brought with them a new religion, new education, all sorts of things. And they essentially ruled Europe from the 7th century AD until the 15th century. But the Portuguese had driven them out of the area that is now Portugal by 1150. But Moorish rule would continue for another 300 plus years in the area of Spain and other places. So the Iberian kingdoms, Spain and Portugal, who weren't united at the time, but were a lot of petty fiefdoms and whatnot, were now taken to the sea. The Portuguese have set up outposts in Azores and Madeira, and the Turks are now preparing for the final siege of Constantinople. This particular last line is important in this background. The Turks over in the area of what is now Turkey have now surrounded what is now Istanbul, the capital, and now are preparing for the final siege. Papal bulls are issued. A series of papal bulls or decrees are issued by the popes of the Catholic Church. These decrees give the Portuguese, as far as they're concerned, dominance over all lands that they find south and southeast, and the right to make war and convert all pagans to Christianity. This is very important. The Catholic Church has now given the Portuguese holy right to make war on anybody who is not a Christian. The three papal bulls that are issued in order are Dum Divorces. This is the most important one, issued 18 June 1452 by Pope Nicholas. This one essentially is the source for the other two that will follow. It is to conquer all Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. A Saracen is what they called a Moor, or an African, an Arab, a Muslim. And pagans, of course, anybody who is not a Christian, and consign them to perpetual servitude, meaning slavery. This was a reaction to Mehmed II finishing a second castle on the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus is a waterway, into the area that is now Istanbul, what was Constantinople, right? There's two castles now that are there, and those two castles essentially cut off the waterway from anything going out or in if the Turks don't say it's okay. He was hoping to spur another crusade to rescue Constantinople. Constantinople was the last bastion of Eastern Christian power. And if that fell, it would create a ripple effect across Europe. Romanus Pontifex, issued in 1454 by Pope Nicholas V, confirmed the crown of Portugal's dominance over all lands south of Cape Bojador in Africa, North Africa. This is an area in Morocco, Mauritania. Along with encouraging the seizure of lands from Saracen, Turks, and non-Christians, it repeated the earlier bull's permission for the enslavement of other such peoples. The bull's primary purpose was to forbid other Christian nations from infringing on the King of Portugal rights of trade and colonization in these regions. The third that was issued into Kateria, as you can see, by Pope Calixtus III in 1456. Again, all this did is reaffirm the first papal bull's decrees. And we go to the siege of Constantinople. On your left here, you see young Mehmed II, 21 years old, riding into the gates of Constantinople. You have, on your right, you have the two castles, as we said, that cut off the waterway, so Constantinople could get no assistance from any Western European power by sea. Okay, so Constantinople falls on 29th May 1453. The fall of Constantinople effectively snuffs out the last major stronghold of Christendom in the East. So now you have a problem. The Portuguese are now forced south. They're now forced south. The Portuguese face a dilemma. They need to maintain trade routes with the East. Remember now the Portuguese have had contact with Eastern kingdoms because of the Moors. The Moors were very effective in co-opting conquered trade routes from people who already made usage of trade from India all the way into Africa. So wherever the Moors conquered, they co-opted the trade routes. They now have a taste for spices and textiles, the riches of the Far East. But the fall of Constantinople presents a few problems. You see, they cannot sail the Mediterranean, which is the sea south of Italy, south of Europe, sea just between North Africa and Southern Europe. They can't sail the Mediterranean because it is still controlled by the Moors, who they are still at war with. They cannot depend on a land road through Anatolia because it is now under Muslim Turk control since the final siege of 1453. Spain is also stirring and making seafaring expeditions. So they must now search for a sea road to the east, to India. And they still want to find this mythical king, Prester John, to help them on the way. This character, Prester John, figures greatly into European mythology because he's some powerful Christian king who has all these troops who will come and help them push out the Moors, push out the Saracens, and bring Christianity to the world. Interestingly, Prester John is supposedly in Africa, in Ethiopia. So as you can see here, the map we have on the left, this is by 1450 what Constantinople or the East looked like. You have the Ottoman Empire pretty much controlling a huge chunk of Eastern Europe and a huge chunk of Western Asia. And you have Constantinople here by itself, cut off from all its allies, completely under duress from the Ottomans, the Turks. So they have to go south. They can't come down through Constantinople here in purple because the Turks control it. So they have no trade routes. They can't use a land route. More problems. The Portuguese have a few issues also. They need to maintain a trade route to the east. Sorry, the Portuguese have no real idea where they're going to. They only have a rough idea of the general shape of the African continent. Remember, Europeans really didn't know much about the world outside of them. What they knew is what they learned from the Moors. The Moors rescued Europeans out of the quote-unquote dark ages. So Europeans had no real clue where they were in terms of seafaring. They really had no idea. So they only knew the general shape of the African continent because of the Catalan Atlas of the Moors. No European sailor had sailed past the Cape of Bojador, as you can see it here on the map on your right. They have not sailed past that point up to that time. On the northeastern coast of Africa, European ships or caravels are not very well made. You know, these ships were for short distances. You know, they were small, they were a bit rickety, you know, short distance ships. And, you know, they really were not suited for any long distance expeditions, such as what would need to happen down the African coast. They are just now taking advantage of knowledge gained from the East. Again, the Moors brought this knowledge into Europe with them. The Moors, the Arabs, they were seafaring people. So they had an idea as to the general shape, but not even they also sailed down the West African coast by that time. They were more concerned about North Africa, and then the land route to the east. This is the Catalan Atlas. The Catalan Atlas gave a general shape of the northern coast of Africa into India, Central Asia, and other places that the Moors have conquered. You see pretty much all of Europe. You see into India. You see again Central Asia. These are all places that the Moors knew about. They either conquered or they had under the influence. The Catalan Atlas. Here's a better view of it. As you can see here, the trade route in North Africa goes from west to the east and branches from there. There's an arrow over here, a big red arrow here on the lower right quadrant, down into Africa. The Moors also themselves knew, just a bit about Africa, but the North African coast was well traveled by the Berbers and Black Africans. These were routes that were in place for hundreds of years, thousands of years. I want you to take a special notice of the figure he is seated in the left panel, holding a golden nugget. That is a depiction of the great Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live in the world. Look him up, Mansa Musa, king of Mali. He's very famous. So as you can see, there's a well-defined picture of Europe, Southern Europe, of Anatolia, all of these places, but not a very well-defined idea of what is Africa, the huge landmass that is Africa. They have no idea. So the Portuguese commenced West African slavery. The Portuguese, under the patronage of Prince Henry the Navigator, which is a dubious name because he never actually navigated anything, but Prince Henry was a person who was somewhat of a visionary to the Portuguese. He's the one who encouraged more sailing, the technology of the ships, uses of maps, the Catalan Atlas. He encouraged these things. So he's considered a great figure in Portuguese history. But he basically benefited from information brought over by the Moors, the Arabs, the Africans, the Berbers. He benefited from that. So in 1418, sorry, they start this expedition down the African coast. They start working their way. By 1441, Antão Goncalves attacks a group of poorly armed natives and kidnaps 2 Berber men and a woman. He's met by another sailor named Nuno Tristão, dispatched by Henry, and they interrogate the captives. This starts a saga that I like to call the Adahu saga. They capture a man called Adahu the Moor. Adahu the Moor is someone who, in my opinion, will live in infamy in African history. This man was taken back with some captives to Portugal to be enslaved. But they realized that he was somewhat more educated than the rest he was with. And this man made a deal with the Portuguese to take him back, and he will provide for them information as to where other people are. Okay? Other people are, and he will then also assist them in gaining knowledge of trade routes and down into Black Africa. So Daho the Moor, in my opinion, was a traitor, and he sold out the rest Africans to save his own skin. So more Berber encampments are raided by the Portuguese over the years, 1443, 1444, 45, and 46. This leads to destruction of entire villages and societies. So the Portuguese, when they first see these people not as just people who they could speak to. They saw them as potential slaves. Because remember, they were sent by the Pope to push the agenda of Christianity and the Portuguese kingdom as a whole. So when they saw these people, they didn't try and speak to these people. They just saw them as enemies. Because remember, they just saw black people, brown people, and considered them Moors. And as far as they're concerned, they are more with the Moors, and they should be able to take these people prisoner. These people have no idea about no Portuguese or no Moors, and nothing. They're just going about their life. But it shows the Portuguese pushing the agenda of their kingdom and expansionism, imperialism of their king. And their God saw these people as lesser than them and as just chattel. More Portuguese end up getting involved in slaving along what is now Mauritania. But they're becoming less successful because the people have started moving inland now. The people now are wary of these Portuguese, these white men. And they've started moving away from their villages and moving inland. But as they push further down into Senegambia, they're becoming a bit less successful. The people, they are more aggressive and they're simply not having it. Nuno Tristão, this man who again is considered a great man in Portugal, but for black people, he is an absolute monster. This man was a voracious slaver, and he moved up and down the West African coast, slaving people. So Tristão leads his final voyage in 1446 in the area of Senegambia. He sails up a river. Well, some people says it's the Gambia River. We don't know. We don't know if the Portuguese even got that far at that time. But he sails up a river with his crew because as far as he's concerned, these people should be easy pickings. As he sails up the river, he's ambushed by either Mandinka or Serra people. He and his entire raiding party are massacred. Every man. There's conflicting report stories that the ship made it back to Portugal, sailed by deckhands, and there's some reports that the ship was then taken by the natives, dragged upriver, dismantled, and the rest people are also killed. This is Nuno Tristão himself on the left, and on the right, this is a depiction on a coin, a two-faced coin, showing his ship, him disembarking, and our brothers waiting for him because they knew what he was coming to do. And they're waiting for him in ambush to deal with him and his evil crew. So we have an account of Portuguese slave expedition in 1444. So it goes, on the first mission, the Portuguese captured about 225 slaves. Now, but is also important because you have to remember, Arabs were also heavily involved, Muslims heavily involved in selling people to the Portuguese and whoever else. It goes on to say some were white or fair, light-skinned, some were well-proportioned, and some were black as Ethiops. The morning after the slaves arrived in Lagos, still weak, Lagos is a major city in Portugal. Still weak from the voyage, the traders lined them up to be distributed equally among the company's investors. Henry, the same Prince Henry, the quote-unquote navigator, was to receive a fifth of the cargo. So Henry, mounted on a powerful horse, what a sight he must have been, accompanied by his retinue, he watched the proceedings. Some of the slaves kept their heads low, their faces bathed in tears. Some groaned grievously, and others looked up, pleading to their God in the heavens. Others threw themselves to the ground. During the divisions, fathers were parted from sons, husbands from wives, brothers from brothers. Having no need of slaves himself, Henry distributed his allotment to the wretched people amongst his retinue. Even though Henry's motive for exploring Africa had not been to capture humans, he believed that by taking these people out of heathen Africa and away from the Muslims, he was rescuing their souls, which otherwise would have been lost. Friars of the Order of Christ immediately introduced the slaves to the Christian religion. Henry observes that the Negroes tended to turn to Christianity more often than the Berbers. He allowed the captives who accepted Christianity a relative level amount of freedom and respect compared to those who did not. In other words, they were not required to wear iron shackles. You see, ladies and gentlemen, African slavery started first going from south in Africa north into Europe. The European never once saw the African as somebody who he could see as a worthy trading partner, an equal human being. He immediately saw them as things to be traded, things to own. This was 1444. Christopher Columbus didn't come to the Caribbean until 1492. Africans were already being brutalized by Europeans in the early 15th century. This is a picture of the animal himself, Prince Henry, the navigator. What a fine man he made himself out to be in the history books. So we push on. Portuguese thuggery in Ghana. The Portuguese finally made their way to what is now the coast of Ghana. And I say Ghana lightly because it would be the coast of Benin, of Togo, of Ivory Coast, Nigeria, under the command of a man called Diogo Cao, or Azambuja. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct. In 1492, he left Portugal with 600 soldiers and 100 masons. That means this man means business. Azambuja is met first by kindness by the native people, but after the intention of building a fort become known to the Fante king, Nana Kwabena, Ansa, he decides against such. Remember, this is his land. King Nana Kwabena Asensa, as Ansa, this is his land. The Portuguese attack the Fante and defeat them, muscling their way into the man's kingdom, and constructed the fort that would become known as the dreaded slave port of Mina Castle in 1482. All this time, the Portuguese are sailing up and down the coast, trading in goods and capturing people, taking them back to Portugal, going up and down, but they have no real port. Mina would become the first and one of the most active slave ports constructed by the Portuguese and other Europeans in the area of West and Central Africa. So again, the Portuguese have been sailing up and down this coast since 1418. They do not have a port to call their own. It is no lands they belong to them. But the people in Africa are still unaware that the Portuguese, according to their Pope, has said any lands that they find belong to the Kingdom of Portugal, the King of Portugal, and the people there are forfeit to the Christian God. So these people don't even know that the Portuguese already consider them to be their property. This is Mina Castle today. On your left is a map of the West African coast. On the right, you see the castle today, and below is what will become of our people crossing the Atlantic. The legacy of Mina. You have to excuse this picture. It was taken at the National Museum. I'm not a great photographer, but it gives you an idea of Mina. This is in 1668. I think then it would have been a British castle. Between 1482 and 1786, clusters of castles and forts were erected along the 500-kilometer long coastline of Ghana, then Gold Coast, serving as fortified trading posts, offering protections from other foreign settlers and threats from the African population. So these forts were constantly under attack by the Africans, who knew what was happening there. From holding gold, ivory, and other ways, the castles gradually became a place for imprisoning slaves, who were reduced to yet another commodity The majestic fortresses housed dank and poorly ventilated dungeons into which shackled captives were crammed with no space to lie down and very little light, without water or sanitation. The floor of the dungeon was littered with human waste, and many captives fell seriously ill. The men were separated from the women, and the captors regularly raped the helpless women. The castle also featured confinement cells, small pitch black spaces for prisoners who revolted or were seen as rebellious. So basically, if you fought for your human right, you were put in solitary and you were separated from everybody else. Once the slaves set foot in the castle, they could spend up to 3 months in captivity under these dreadful conditions before being shipped off to the New World. Mina Castle was one such fort constructed by the Portuguese between 1482 and 1486. It was the last place that thousands of African people would see of their homeland. Do you understand me? This is what the Portuguese brought to Africa. This is what the Portuguese broke open the Atlantic slave trade by the erection of this Mina Castle. So here we go. This is a excerpt from a book, and it has a correspondence between the same king I just mentioned, King Ansa, King Nana Kwabena Ansa of the Fante, to the Portuguese. And it reads, I am not insensible to the high honor which your great master, the chief of Portugal, he called him the chief, has this day conferred upon me. His friendship I have always endeavored to merit by the strictness of my dealings with the Portuguese and by my constant exertions to procure an immediate lading of the vessels. Meaning, he's been dealing with them on a trading basis. When they come, he makes sure that the vessels are laden out quickly and they can go. But never until this day did I observe such a difference in the appearance of his subjects. So the Portuguese have now shown him a different face. The Portuguese are now here for his land. They have hitherto been meanly attired, were easily contented with the commodity they received, and so far from wishing to continue in this country, and were never happy until they could complete their lading and return. So the Portuguese before this time used to just come as tradesmen. You know, they were always ready to go. They wanted to go back home. Now I remark a strange difference. A great number, richly dressed, are anxious to be allowed to build houses and to continue among us. Men of such eminence, conducted by a commander who from his own account seems to have descended from the God who made night and day, can never bring themselves to endure the hardships of this climate, nor would they here be able to procure any of the luxuries that are bound in their own country. The passions that are common amongst all men will therefore inevitably bring on disputes, and is far from preferable that both of our nations should continue on the same footing as they hitherto have done. Allowing your ships to come and go as usual, the desire of seeing each other occasionally will preserve peace between us. The sea and land, being always neighbors, are continually at variance and are contending who shall give way. The sea, with great violence, attempting to subdue the land, and the land with equal obstinacy defying the sea. You see, this king, King Kwabena Ansa, saw what was coming. He knew that the Portuguese come here is going to be a problem. We are different people, and it's going to be an issue between us. It is better we see each other occasionally so we can have our space. Give each other our space and we'll be fine. He remarked that the Portuguese all of a sudden came and were now anxious to build this house, anxious to build communities. He doesn't want them there. And what do the Portuguese do? The Portuguese force their way onto his land. Force their way onto his land. And force him and his people to give up Mina Castle. Force their way. Again, they have come on the command of the Pope, of the God, of the King, to seize any lands that they see there. King answered, as far as he concerned, this was his land. But as far as the Portuguese were concerned, God himself gave them permission to subjugate these people and to take their lands. You see, this is what the people of the west coast of Africa saw. The people here were extremely skilled in metalwork. These were some bronzes from the areas, Benin, and they depict Portuguese soldiers. In the middle here, you see a Portuguese man holding a firearm. On the right, a Portuguese man holding a sword. Another two soldiers here on the left. They depicted what they saw. So we go to 1483. Diogo Cao makes contact with the Kingdom of Congo. The Kingdom of Congo was a gigantic kingdom, a powerful kingdom in the west central coast of Africa. As you can see here on the right, its influence extended around itself. It was a huge kingdom. This is the city of Loango. Loango was just north of the Kingdom of Congo. It was either a vassal state, or a part of the Kingdom of Congo. This is what Europeans saw. You don't see anybody here running around in the jungle and eating bananas. You don't see any sickness here. You see well laid out cityways. You see well laid out roads. You see well structured houses. You see people going about their business here. You don't see any poverty. You don't see any uncivilized people here. You see, what Europeans did back then, they depicted what they saw. So this is an important picture. And this is just Loango. This is just a vassal area of the Kingdom of Congo. So imagine what Congo was like. This is a picture of the Congolese king at the time of Diogo Cao. So Diogo Cao sails up the Congo River, where he meets natives of the Kingdom of Congo. He convinces for natives to go back to Portugal with him as emissaries. He also sends 4 of his own men to treat with the King of Congo. So the emissaries stay in Portugal and, of course, baptized and given Christian teachings. And they return to their king in 1491. But not alone. They bring with them Portuguese masons, merchants, priests, and of course the all-important soldiers. So they come back with Christianity as agents, because remember what the Christian church does. The Christian church sends agents with you. They themselves might not come, but they will send an agent, one of your own people, to come and preach to you. And they bring back with them masons to build on the land, merchants to set up shops on the land, and priests to convert the rest. And if you won't allow the masons to build and the merchants to set up shop in the places the masons build, the soldiers will force you to do it. So they meet King Nuku Nzinga. He was later baptized as King João I. So this king takes on a Portuguese name, and this will continue as a trend in Congo and in Angola. You will see people, they have all these Portuguese names. They took them because they feel they were somehow special if they took these Portuguese names. And the Kingdom of Congo converts. Okay, you see here a priest meeting a nobleman in Congo on your left. You see here the same priests have the same Congolese now carrying crosses and carrying his stuff. King João I dies, and his son Afonso takes the throne. Afonso is a curious character. Afonso embraced Christianity. I mean, holistically. He really thought that he was just like the Portuguese. He really thought that he was carrying out the will of the Portuguese God. He thought that by accepting Portuguese Christianity, that he was somehow better than the rest. I mean, he pursued Christianity with all his heart. So in 1509, Afonso takes the throne. The Portuguese by this time have thoroughly set up themselves in Congolese society. The Portuguese have assisted the monarchy in battles with their firearms. So the Portuguese are now essentially soaking their way into Congolese society. They've infiltrated now. They've attached themselves onto the Congolese. They're now in the Congolese court. Okay? But they're also doing something else. The Portuguese are also starting to go behind the king's back. Because now, once they're in the land, they're starting to figure out the ways of the Congolese. And they start going behind the laws and subverting the laws and the customs. But what else is happening in the world at the time? In 1494, Spain forces the church and Portugal into the Treaty of Tordesillas, which they essentially drew a line down the earth. Because by 1492, remember, Columbus sailed across to the quote-unquote New World, into the Bahamas, and then back to Spain, and told him he found lands. This becomes a problem, because the Portuguese, as far as they're concerned, the Pope already gave them dominion over all the seas. So an agreement is made, and a line is drawn on the middle of the world. Whatever is on the east of the line belongs to Portugal. Whatever is on the west of the line belongs to Spain. Just so happens Brazil is east of the line. And Pedro Cabral lands in what is now Recife, I think, Brazil. And he finds, of course, people are already there. But the people don't know what is coming to them is disaster. By 1500, the Portuguese have stumbled upon what is now Brazil and claimed it as per agreement in the Treaty of Tordesillas. They commenced the genocide and enslavement of the natives and the building of colonies. To support these colonies and generate wealth for the crown, the Portuguese need free labor. Brazil would end up seeing the largest number of Africans forcibly imported by the Europeans starting in 1501. Remember, the Portuguese are in Congo by this time. They have now started to enslave people and send them across to Brazil. Brazil ended up becoming the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery in 1888. You see, the Portuguese, again, saw Africans from the very moment they met them as things. They saw the Africans not as equal partners. They just saw them as things to be conquered. This is a picture of Congolese royalty. These are European drawings. These are European drawings. They show Congolese royalty in all its splendor. You don't see nobody running around here with no Ebola and no nonsense. You don't see that. The Europeans depicted exactly what they saw. Powerful civilizations, rich kingdoms. And we continue. This excerpt here is from the same King Afonso, because things have started to go bad now in the Kingdom of Congo. And he wrote letters back and forth with the King of Portugal. Because again, these people really thought the King of Portugal saw them as equals. He really thought that. So he addresses the King of Portugal: Sir, Your Highness, should know our kingdom is being lost in so many ways that it is convenient to provide for the necessary remedy, since this is caused by the excessive freedom given by your agents and officials to the men and merchants who are allowed to come to this kingdom and set up shops with goods and many things which have been prohibited by us. So imagine the king of Congo has forbidden certain things, but the Portuguese not trying to hear that. I'm going to do what I want to do because God and the Portuguese kingdom has said I have a right to these lands. But Alfonso doesn't understand that. He doesn't know about the papal bulls, and which they spread throughout our kingdoms and domains in such an abundance that many of our vassals whom we have had in our obedience do not comply because they have the things in greater abundance than we ourselves. So again, the Portuguese have items that other people want, including firearms, and they have no issues subverting the king of Congo because it is trade amongst all else, and the king of Congo can't tell them anything. And it is with these things that we had them content and subjected under our vassalage and jurisdiction. So it is doing a great harm not only to the service of God, but the security and peace of our kingdoms and state as well. The Portuguese are fanning open revolt amongst the vassals of the Kingdom of Congo. So on one hand, they're playing good emissaries to the King of Congo. The other hand, they're going behind his back. And we cannot reckon how great the damage is, since the mentioned merchants are taking every day our natives, sons of the land, and the sons of our noblemen and vassals and our relatives, because the thieves and men of bad conscience grab them, wishing to have the things and ways of this kingdom, which they are ambitious of. They grab them and get them to be sold, and so great so is the corruptions and licentiousness that our country is being completely depopulated, and your highness should not agree with this nor accept it as in your service. So he's appealing to the king of Portugal to check your men. Check your men. Because they are now looking for the worst amongst us. And of course, it's easy to find the worst amongst us. They're all over. These people always find the bandits and the people of no morals to do business with. So they're finding bandits, highwaymen, to go and commit kidnappings on people who are not, I repeat, not already enslaved. Because there's an already established system of indentured servitude in African kingdoms. It was not like European slavery. You could be a slave by war, by selling yourself into slavery, and you could always get out of slavery. But some African kingdoms would have sold those people because they had no idea what the Europeans were into. But the Europeans were not interested in that. Remember, by now they have Brazil and they need labor, free labor over there. So they go and they make deals with bandits to commit kidnappings in the Kingdom of Congo and their vassal neighbors. Moreover, sir, in our kingdoms, there's another great inconvenience, which is of little service to God. And this is that many of our people keenly desirous as they are of the ways and things of your kingdom, which are brought here by your people in order to satisfy their voracious appetite, sees many of our people freed and exempt men. Freed and exempt men. These men are not slaves. These are regular people going about their lives. These people are being kidnapped by bandits in the employ of Portugal and the sons of noblemen and our relatives, and take them to be sold to the white men who are in your kingdoms. And for this purpose, they have concealed them, and others are brought during the night so that they might not be recognized. And as soon as they are taken by the white men, they are immediately ironed and branded by fire. And when they are carried to be embarked, if they are caught by our guardsmen, the whites allege that they have bought them, but cannot say from whom. And so that is our duty to do justice and restore the free men to their freedom. But it cannot be done if your subjects feel offended as they claim to be. You see, they have a problem because maybe there was a system that people who are already captured in wars could be sold, But you can't just take anybody and say you're a slave. And that is what the Portuguese saw black Africans are, just things. There's no free men, there's no noblemen, just slaves to be bought, to be bought. And they would deal with anybody to get those slaves for their new colony in Brazil. You see, Christianity played a very important role in the subjugation of African people. To enslave someone, to colonize someone, you must first shackle their mind and colonize, to shackle and colonize their mind. So on your left, you have the violence. This white priest setting fire to what appears to be a traditional shrine. Set fire, chase the people. Here you go now on the right-hand side. And he sets up a Christian temple and somehow convinces the Africans this is the right way. And the Africans bow down to this white priest. This is Christianity in Africa. There's two faces to it. Violence on one hand, and then feigning piety on the other. The Christian church is a co-conspirator to the destruction of African people. On your left, you have the Portuguese priests. How creepy does that look? You destroy the people's way of life and then bring them onto you as wretched souls. You have this lady here being photographed, child crying, hungry. And she's praying to the Christian God. When is he going to help you? When? And what has it left us? How can you be great when you bow down to your white father still? What has it left us in West Africa? Look at these pictures. The image of the white Jesus has been the most powerful weapon to keep Europeans in power over Africans. We cannot continue to worship something that was brought there by force. I explained to you already how Christianity got there. By force. Yet here you have black people bowing down to this European God, this Jesus, who has no interest in them. And to the end of this very short presentation, you see here Portuguese conquests. And I call them conquests because everywhere they went, in all these routes, from 1418, they caused a war. Every single way they went. They went with orders to conquer and convert by any means necessary. And that brings me to the end. Oh, before I go, here are my sources. You can look at any of these sources. Look for anything I said here. I want to send a special thank you to especially the St. Christopher National Trust Museum, who have good information there. I want to thank them very much. And I want to thank you for listening. I'll probably do this over with a few more slides because there's a few things that I want to get over. But this, I want to share this with you. It is still incomplete, but I want to share it with you still to see where I'm going. So again, thank you for listening on how the Portuguese started West African slavery. Thank you for listening.